Hold on, not every page has page numbers on it. I don't know why. Hi everyone, my name is Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and today I'm going to be starting a new themed vlog. The other day when I was using Snapchat, I noticed that Snapchat had added an AI person that you could talk to, and I got curious. What books would the Snapchat AI recommend to me if I asked for book recommendations? And that is what I did. So I started a little conversation with the AI over on Snapchat and asked for book recommendations. Throughout this vlog, we'll see how that chat goes. As we get recommendations for books, I will read those and give you my thoughts. In some cases, it took a little bit of time to get an actual recommendation that I hadn't read, but in general, we ended up getting 3 books recommended throughout my chat with the AI that I can read and review for you all. So let's jump in, let's jump to the chat and see what the first book Snapchat AI recommended to me. After a little back and forth with the AI, we got a book recommendation of The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. I know, I can't believe I haven't read this, but there is a reason. Up until the start of this year, I did not really read romance. I only did very, very little, usually around Christmas, that was it. Now, this year, I'm in my romance era. I've read a lot of romance this year. It's probably my most read genre of this year. So I'm catching up on reading like popular romance novels that everyone knows and loves and that I avoided just because I wasn't reading romance. The Kiss Quotient is certainly one of those books that I've had my eye on since I've started to read romance, and thanks to Snapchat AI, I'm gonna read it now. I'm gonna go start reading this. I've got a little mark here to check in with you at about the 50% mark, so that I can kind of go over what this book is actually about once I've had a chance to read a little bit of it so I know, and also give you some of my early thoughts in the book. So let's go and start The Kiss Quotient. Hi everyone, I am officially about the halfway point in The Kiss Quotient. I am loving this. I can see why this is such a loved romance on BookTube because I'm having a great time. This follows Stella, and Stella does something with economics. She's like an economist, something like that. Does like spreadsheets, data, loves that sort of thing. And Stella also has Asperger's. So Stella has had 3 romantic interactions with men in the past, and they were all kind of horrible for Stella. She takes that as ownership on herself, that it's horrible because she has autism and doesn't like being touched and doesn't really know what she's doing. However, we kind of realize as we go on that these men were just kind of like horrible and weren't willing to like work with Stella, and yeah. Anyway, she decides that she needs practice in sex and decides to hire a male escort to help her learn how to have sex. That is what this book is about, and it is such a fun book. She gets paired up with Michael as a male escort, and Michael is amazing. Michael is so sweet and so understanding of Stella and really is taking his time with Stella to make her feel comfortable, and pretty much instantly realizes that he is attracted to Stella, but also as they get to know each other, they start having kind of chemistry with their personalities as well. I'm at about the halfway point, and Michael just realized that Stella has autism. Michael has a cousin, Kian, who has autism and has now put the pieces together. Stella didn't tell him that she has autism, but he has kind of figured it out just because he knows what it looks like when his cousin gets overstimulated or overwhelmed. And also his other cousin, Quan, figured it out even earlier in the book
by meeting Stella at a bar, and she admits that she has autism to Quan. So when Michael figures it out, Quan's like, yeah, how did you not know? You're taking her to bars where it's really like overwhelming for her. Like, you should have noticed. I'm loving how the book is tackling that topic, as well as the relationship and how Stella needs to kind of feel comfortable with someone to be open to being touched and kissed and all the things that go into a relationship. Michael and her are not in a relationship. Obviously, it is still kind of like fake dating because he is an escort and being like paid to be with Stella. But I mean, we all know how fake dating goes. So I'm sure the second half of this book will be that. I can already see that they both have feelings. The feelings have started to come. The feelings are coming. I'm definitely having such a fun time with this book. I almost didn't even want to put it down to come update you because I just wanted to keep reading the book. So I'm going to go. And I'm going to go finish The Kiss Quotient because I'm very excited to see how this ends. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of obvious how it's going to end because it's a romance. And we all assume there'll be a happily ever after. But I still want to read how it works out and all the intricacies of it. But at this moment in time, I'm speeding through this and could easily like just go and not put it down because I'm having such a great time with it.
So I have finished The Kiss Quotient, and I was really enjoying this book when I did my mid-book update, and it kind of went downhill in the second half of this book. I still had an overall good time with this, and it was a really fast reading experience, so I'm still gonna give it 3 stars. I didn't dislike the book in any way, but there were a few aspects of it that I didn't love so much. The whole point of this book was that she hires Michael to kind of teach her how to have sex and also how to have a relationship. And when I finished the halfway point, it felt like they were kind of transitioning into an actual relationship. They were both having feelings for each other, and Michael had kind of mentioned in his own head and in his thoughts that maybe they would kind of stop this paid relationship. However, he never communicates that to Stella, so for the whole time, it is still a kind of escort client relationship. And I just felt like that went on for much too long, and it started to kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable for me in the dynamics of that in the second half of this book. As well as I felt that Stella really communicated how she was feeling fairly well, but Michael, in his miscommunication, drove me right up the wall. Like, there was just so much miscommunication in the second half of this book, mostly from Michael, and not just towards Stella, toward every person in Michael's family, with Quan, with his mother, with his sisters. There's things that end this book, which I won't go into, around his mother and her health care that he still hasn't communicated to his mother about, and the book's done. Miscommunication in romance is by far the biggest thing that I dislike when it's a major plot point. I don't mind it occasionally, but I just felt like this could have really helped if these people would have just sat down for 5 seconds and talked it through. Like I said, not just with just Stella and Michael, and I feel like it was mostly Michael who was miscommunicating. I feel like Stella was saying what she wanted and he was not listening and then not communicating what he actually wanted, partially due to some underlying insecurities and past traumas, but still, as an adult, I expect you to be able to communicate that better. Maybe not with someone you have just met like Stella, but with your own family and with your friends. I want a bit more communication than this book had in it. And that was the only thing I didn't like about this book, was that dynamic went on a little too long for me to feel like super comfortable with it, as well as the miscommunication in the second half of this book. There was a lot, again, especially with Michael. Michael also, and this is a very small thing, very, very small, but it did bother me. He kept calling her my Stella, and I don't know, it just felt really possessive for someone who was really the reason they weren't together. I don't know, I didn't love that part, but it's not something I would like mark it down a star for, but it just felt a little odd to me. And just a bit too possessive, just in my opinion. Again, all of this is just my opinion. I know people love this book. I certainly can't speak to the autism rep in this book. My son does have autism, but not this type of autism, and I don't have autism, so I would not feel comfortable speaking in any way on whether this autism rep was like good or bad. It felt okay to me, but I would certainly want to listen to someone who actually has autism and understands how Stella sees the world from a own voice's point of view before I would ever want to speak confidently on that. But from my own perspective on having a child with autism, it seemed okay for me in that regard. It didn't make me feel like, ooh, this is a bad portrayal. It seemed fine to me, but like I said, I wouldn't want to go off just my opinions on that. That being said, we're coming out at a 3-star. I did have a good time with it. It was enjoyable. There were things I really liked about it, especially in the first half of the book, and things that were not my favorite, and it's gonna come out in the middle of the rankings at a 3-star. Let's jump back to our dear Snapchat AI and see what book they recommended to me next. I kind of asked Snapchat AI for a thriller, and after a little bit of conversation, we came out to The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I'm very excited to finally pick this up. This has been on my shelf for a very, very long time. I have the whole series on my shelf, and I haven't read any of them, and I think it's because they are very chunky books. Especially for like a thriller mystery, they chunky. But it is what Snapchat thinks I should read, and also it gets it off my TBR shelf and into my red shelf, which is very exciting. So I'm gonna go read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Since this is very chunky, maybe we'll update every 200 to 300 pages, and we'll do updates that way for this book. I think that's what we'll do, because I do like doing the mid-book updates because it makes me feel like you can kind of see my whole reading journey. I didn't used to do vlogs that way, but I think I'm gonna switch up to doing it because then you can kind of get my thoughts throughout the book, because obviously, as with the Kiss Quotient, you could kind of see that like the first part of the book I enjoyed a bit more than the second part of the book because of how I vlogged it. Anyway, let's go and start this and read at least the first, 200-ish pages. I've reached page 288 of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I am still trying to figure out completely how even this story is going to get started, but I do have an idea what's going on. So our main character is Mikkel Blomvik, which I'm sure I'm butchering that last name, but I'm doing my best. And he is a journalist for a pretty well-known magazine called Millennium, but he has now stepped down from his post as journalist and editor, and he still is, I think, part owner. Because of a scandal, he had to go to court because he was charged with basically libel against someone with a piece that he wrote and lost that court case at the very beginning of this book. So we kind of pick up right at that point where he's lost this court case, he's stepping down from the magazine, he's not really sure what he's going to do. We see him getting connected with Henrik Wagner. Henrik is a wealthy man. He owns a portion of a business, a family-run business with most of his family, and they all have like shares in this company, as well as they live on this secluded island. 40 years ago, his niece, Harriet, went missing during a time where there was like a accident on the way to get to the island, like the only bridge that gets you on and off this island. There was a huge accident, the bridge was closed, Harriet went missing. So we know Harriet never left the island because it would be impossible. So what happened to Harriet 40 years ago? Henrik
assumes she has been murdered, but we honestly don't know what happened to Harriet, and he has tasked Mikkel with finding out what happened to Harriet. He's brought him to the island under kind of like covert means, saying he's writing a book about Henrik's life, but that's not really why he's there. He's there to investigate what happened to Harriet. The other main character in this book is Lisbeth Salander, who is the girl with the dragon tattoo. At this point, she is not a part of this investigation, but on the back it says that he will be aided by her. So I'm assuming at some point she will be helping him. We have seen her a bit, not much at this point, but we have seen her a little bit. She is kind of working for like a security company, but doing like background checks and investigations into people for the security company. That's what we see right now in the book. And she was tasked in doing a background check on Mikkel, which is kind of how they connect, but has stopped doing that at this point. So when these two characters kind of come together, I don't know, but it does say on the back of the book they will. So we'll see. At this point, I am still kind of unsure how I feel about this. It might just be too early in the book to know. There are times where I'm really interested, and then there are times where things are said that I'm like, I don't really like the wording of that. There's some offensive terms in this book, but I am taking into account that this book is older and also translated, so I'm trying to take that into account. But there's a couple of times where I'm like, don't like how that is talked about, especially in regards to Lisbeth. There's some wording of people saying things about her that I just don't like. The wording's not something I appreciate in any way, shape, or form. But like I said, I'm trying to take into account that this book is a little bit older as well as translated. So like, I don't know if that's the wording the author actually used. So I'm going to take that into account. However, I am interested in the Harriet case and finding out what happens to Harriet. So there are times where I'm really interested, and then there's times where I'm kind of like only somewhat interested, and then there's, like I said, some wording that I'm not a fan of. I could see my enjoyment going either way at this point. Like I said, it's still really early, and it took me a little while to get used to the writing style of this book because, again, it is translated, and I think that always makes it a little bit more difficult to like settle into. But I love picking up a translated work because I feel like it's so fun to experience literature from other countries, and that's how we get to do that. I will say this book, because I have the mass market paperback, there's certainly not that many words per page. The font is very large, so it is reading very quickly, which is lovely. And it is quite fast paced at this point, which I'm also liking. Anyway, let's dive in. I'm going to read another third of this book. My goal is to get to page 601 next, and then check in with you at that point. That'll put me about 2/3 of the way through this book, and we'll chat about it then. Well, I've made it to page 603 or 600 and whatever page I've made it to, just over 600 pages. And we have some things to discuss. I know this is a well-loved book, and I'm wondering if it was a well-loved book just for its time. I do not know. I am going to finish it. I'm not going to DNF it, but we need to discuss this book for a second. So I still agree with everything I said in the first half of this book. Not the first half, the first third. There's a lot of times words are used in this book that I would really rather were not. They're offensive, and I don't like it in the book, and it's continued. I don't know how much of that is the translation though, so I'm trying to kind of keep that in mind. However, I was reading along, trying to kind of piece together this story, and then out of kind of seemingly nowhere, there was some sexual harassment happening in this book of one of our characters. I'm not going to say which, just in case you consider who that is a spoiler, but I don't think the fact that sexual harassment and assault is in here is a spoiler, because I think people should know that. I did not know because I actually knew nothing about this book. Luckily, none of that is a trigger for me personally, but I think people should know. And then there was a extremely graphic sexual assault and rape in this book. Like, wow. In my opinion, at this point in the book, I actually don't even know why it was in there. If it has anything to do with the Harriet Varner cold case, I have yet to put that together.
And if it doesn't, I really do question why it's in this book at all. And I still question, even if it does somehow have to do with the plot of the story, why it needed to be to the graphic level that it needed. It felt like it was graphic for the sake of being graphic and to explicitly show harm towards women. And I did not understand why that was needed in this book at this point in time. I still don't. Also, like I said, I am interested in the Harriet Varner case and what happened to Harriet. However, some of the things that happened around the time of Harriet that they think might be connected, which I won't go into specifics, again, extremely graphic. The way it's described, the way it's shown on page is extremely, extremely graphic. And again, I don't think it's necessary to go to that detail for the story to move forward. It really feels like it's trauma and showing graphic depiction for the sake of shock and awe, or for the sake of being graphic sake. And I don't agree with that. It just feels very uncomfortable to me. I'm reading it and I feel extremely uncomfortable. I don't think there's ever been another book where I could say that about, to be honest, where I felt like it was so graphic that I felt uncomfortable, but it was also to the point that like I didn't feel like it added to the story. I actually felt like it was taking away. I'm not going to, like I said, not finish the book because I do want to know kind of how it ends, and to fully critique the book, I do want to finish it. However, I do own the rest of this series and I will be unhauling it unread. I don't really have any interest in continuing a book or a series that has this kind of content in it when I don't feel like it's done well or really has a purpose. I'm actually going to take about a day or two off and read something else because I just feel uncomfortable at this moment and I think I just need a little bit of a breather from this. But I will come back in a couple of days and finish off The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And then we'll dive into the last book that Snapchat AI has recommended for me, which hopefully will be less traumatic than this one. So I have finished The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and I am going to give this 1 star. I cannot get past the level of violence against women in this book. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. There are points that it does not need to be in there at all. And there are points where I do understand that part of our case follows violence against women, but it does not need to be described to the level that it is. I can't get past it. I can't get past it. The wording used in this book, a lot of the words are offensive, and I don't know how much of that is the translation, but I can only go off what I have in my hands, and I can't get past any of that. That being said, I didn't love the case in and of itself. Didn't love how the ending of that worked out. I didn't find it overall interesting enough to overlook some of the problems with this book. Also, the case ended with like 100 pages left in the book, and all we do is follow our main character going back to work at his magazine for a very long time. And maybe they're setting up for book 2 in that, but by that point, I did not care. I did not care about anything that was going on anymore and was just trying to finish the book. And I have 1 star. I'm gonna unhaul the rest of this series. I have no interest in reading the rest of it. And this was a fail for Snapchat AI's suggestion, but I have high hopes for what Snapchat AI has given us for book 3. Let's jump to that chat really quickly and see what the last book Snapchat AI recommended. Recommended Lies of Locke Lamora. I am very excited to read this book. I have it on Kindle. I've heard amazing things about this fantasy book. It is the first in a series, and I'm pretty excited to dive in. I don't know really anything about the book. I know people who have read it fairly recently and really liked it, so I have very high hopes for this book. I'm hoping to end on a high note, and let's dive in. I will check in with you around the 50% point and kind of go over what exactly this fantasy book follows, but let's dive in and read the final book that Snapchat AI has recommended to me. And like I said, it can only go up from here. Really, it can only go up.
Hi everyone, I am in my car waiting at an appointment, but yesterday I made it to 51% of Lies of Locke Lamora, so I figured I would come and update you on my experience so far with the book, what the book is about, because I'm pretty sure I told you nothing when I started it because I didn't really know. I had no idea, and now I do, so I'm going to talk with you. Lies of Locke Lamora follows the Gentlemen Bastards, and basically Locke Lamora is kind of like the head of this group of 5 young men who are the Gentlemen Bastards. And they have been raised from very young children. They were orphaned and sold to someone called the Thief Maker, who basically taught them how to be thieves. However, Locke Lamora is kind of advanced in his thievery. He's very clever even as a young child and is trying to put over these ruses that are very extreme and are getting the Thief Maker in potentially some trouble. So the Thief Maker sells him to another con man called Chains. Chains basically pretends to be like a priest and gets money that way. And we see Chains kind of bring these 5 orphans together and make this group called the Gentlemen Bastards. We see it in both timelines. So we see them in their past as children as this is happening, and then we see them in the present as adults pulling over these very elaborate heists. It basically is a heist book in the long and short of it all. Locke Lamora is kind of a master of disguise. He changes his appearance. Like I said, his schemes are very elaborate and very intricate. I will say, for the first part of this book so far is in a part 1, part 2 situation. If there's more parts, I haven't hit them yet. Right now I'm in the middle of part 2. And part 1 was really hard for me to follow, and I did not feel connected to the characters, and I considered DNFing this book. I really did. I was really struggling to figure out what this book was doing and what was going on, and I was really struggling. I was struggling. The timeline was hard because we were moving from past to present, and also within the heists, not necessarily in a linear fashion. And I wasn't 100% sure what was going on and who was who, and I was just having a really hard time settling into the characters and also the writing style for part 1. I had a little chat with some people who everyone said it is a slow start, give it to part 2. And I'm so glad that I did, because now that I'm into part 2, I'm actually really enjoying where the story is going and what is happening. So I'm really invested now. I think I've settled into the writing style of the author, and I'm having a good time with this now. But I will say, it was a slow start. I had a hard time at the beginning. Anyway, I'm going to head off, but I will continue on. Hopefully it continues to just keep getting better and better as the book goes along, which is what's happened so far. And we'll see where we go from here.
I did it. I finished The Lies of Locke Lamora, and I have to say I ended up really enjoying this book, which is actually shocking to me from how I felt about it when I first started. The first book, this is separated into, I think, book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, so like parts. The first book was hard for me. I really did consider DNFing that. I said that in the clip that you just saw. I really considered DNFing this book because I just could not sink into the writing style for the first 30% of this book. I was intrigued in the idea of this kind of group of orphans who are now adults turned into this team of thieves and a master of disguise, and I was interested, but the timeline and the writing style were taking me a really long time to get used to. But once it hit part 2, which it had just hit when I did my last update, I started to really fall in love with these characters and this world. Part of this book, which I didn't mention in my earlier synopsis, but I am going to mention now because it is still part of the synopsis. I guess I just didn't realize how important it was to the book based off part 1 of the book, is that this follows a really interesting kind of political system. We see Locke Lamora now as an adult, but also as a child, paying kind of a fee to this Kappa Brazavi. And this person is basically almost like a mob boss. So he allows everyone to be thieves or whatever they are in the community, but they have to pay him a little bit on the side. They have to pay him a percentage. They have to come swear their loyalty to him. And that is happening from when Locke is a child right up until now as Locke is an adult. However, now as an adult, there is another basically person on the scene, another mob person. If they're not mob people, but it comes across that way in the book. Anyway, someone is challenging this Kappa's reign and kind of leadership of this whole criminal enterprise and how they have control of basically the entire city because of that. That is the Gray King. We don't know who the Gray King is for most of this book. And we see this kind of power war and this power shift going on through this entire book. And we see how Locke and the Gentleman Bastards get kind of caught up in the middle of that entire thing. I loved Locke, I loved Jean, I loved Bug, I loved the Sansa twins. Those are all the Gentleman Bastards. I fell in love with each one of them for very different reasons. They each have a really special place in this group of thieves and how they run their kind of business per se, and how they work. And each one of them has like a specialty to make this be a great organization of thieves. So between the political system and how that was playing out and how it involved Locke and the Gentleman Bastards, and also the way the author made me care about this group of thieves. You would not think that you can make a group of thieves and kind of criminals so likable, but Scott Lynch has done a great job making me fall in love with these morally gray characters, and I absolutely loved them all. I loved them all. I was so intrigued in the world building and the political system. I was sold once we got to about 31% of this book. And as it went through, I just got more and more sold. Because it took me so long to settle into this, I can't give it 5 stars. So I am gonna give it 4, but I have a feeling that book 2 might actually do better for me because I'm already used to the characters, the writing style, the world. What took me so long in the beginning, I'm already there. I'm used to how the author writes a timeline and how the past and present are flowing together. I'm now used to it. So for book 2, it shouldn't take me as long to fall in. I am going to be reading book 2, not right now, but hopefully very, very soon. But I don't think I've had a book in recent memory where I really was so close to DNFing it, but stuck it out and ended up really being so glad that I stuck it out. I'm so glad that I talked to some people and they all told me, get to the second half of this book because the first half, it just takes a second to settle in. And I'm so glad that I took that advice because I really did enjoy this book once I did. That is the end of Snapchat AI Chooses My Reads. We have been all over the place, a 3-star, a 1-star, and a 4-star. So did Snapchat AI do a good job? I will let you be the judge of that. It's iffy. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.